And it's a very different way of describing movement than describe it in language where you can only describe one thing at a time. And rather than just leave it hanging, we have a movement notator here.
I'm not a notator, but I am studying.
Yeah. So.
It's another movement system called the
Yeah.
What was that? Yeah. So just as I got more into movement a few years ago, I found out about this course in Lebanon, which I've started to do. And as part of that course, you learn a little bit of the movement notation. Primarily, I think in my course, because we don't go into Laban notation, which is quite complex, we only look at motifing. It's a tool really to help us observe better. And as Zoran said yesterday, it's really only notating the essence of a movement. So when you see somebody do a movement, you just look at whatever the main component is, and then you can chart it and write it down. So Zoran has a couple of different slides, and I also have a video and an example of it. This first slide is actually body parts. So before you can notate something, you obviously need to know how you can define it a little bit. So each of the body parts has a different symbol. So you can see the pelvis is the square with the dark circle. And then, for example, like the head is like that, kind of like the C. The fingers, the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder girdle all have different symbols that they represent. It's also very useful if you can have a look in this book. I've got a couple of symbols here which help people understand direction. So there's 26 directions, but they can be on different levels. So you can have it on a deep level, which is low to the ground, which is the dark colour, medium level, which is just with a dot, and then high, which has got the crosses in it. So to actually notate something, you at a very basic level, you combine these two elements, which is the body part and at what level the part is actually moving. So I've got some in this book. Zoran has some very complex ones up there, but I thought just as a way to help people understand, and I'm sorry, we don't have the facilities to put it up, but, can we, we can? Oh, cool. Okay, Jenny, we should have spoken to you.
Get a Zoom. Yeah, I'm number 2. You're number 2? Yeah, I'm number 2. It was the connection was dodgy the other day.
Okay, so the two basic examples I thought I could show you is actually a notation of the same arm movement done either sequentially or simultaneously. So in this particular notation, which we'll try and get up, it's actually shown on the diagram that you move the shoulder girdle, the elbow, the wrist, and then the fingers. So just by actually seeing this, you should know that it's like a sequential movement, and then you'll actually go back in like that. So, but you can, of course, also do it all at the same time, and then that would be written like this with the movement happening at the same time. So, I mean, it's instead of using words, it just gives you, I guess it's a different language, but as soon as you see this, you should know kind of what you're going to do. I also have some video examples. They're very, very basic, but something that I guess puts it a little bit clearer. So, sorry, we don't have this on screen. But if you watch this video, which is a very basic, sure. So instead of describing that in words, could actually just have this diagram here, which shows someone jumping and moving their arms like that. I've got some other examples I can show you. So this one, which is a little more complex, well, I don't know, it's ballet, it's a little bit more graceful. So, yeah, which one is it? This one over here. So, this shows change of support in terms of different leg during the movement and the circling gesture and moving forward. So, I guess it's just kind of really neat way of describing movement and recording it for, I guess, future generations who might want to use it. So you use it like as an instructor or something, you can write down their routine, use it. You can use it in many different fields. Like people also use it acting, dancing. I'm not a dance choreographer or anything like that. I mean, I'm just using it as part of my course where we do a lot of movement observation and where we just want to actually capture what is essential part of that movement. So we notate it and then we can actually take that script and we can actually make up something for ourselves, which might look completely different, but it keeps the essence of what the initial choreography had in it. So, yeah.
I'm going to follow up on your last comment because the last comment is actually quite important, and that is how do you keep the intention of a particular choreographer's piece rather than having a video in front of you, watching the video play and going, is this particular to that dancer or is that what the choreographer intended? In the same way that when you get to be ATM teachers and you're looking across a room, you'll get to ask yourself, are they doing the movement that I'm intending or are they off doing something else, their own little variation? And that's a really important thing because when you start to look at ATM design, there is a particular idea in mind and people can orbit around that idea in very many different ways. So what notation tries to get to is like, what is that intent that so many different things can orbit around? And I got a few examples. So, oops, we have to change computer. Sorry about that. Computer. Do any Feldenkrais teachers use movement notation? Not that I know of. However, you can buy a book called 50 Lessons, 50 ATM Lessons in Eshkol Watchman Movement Notation. And if you know how to read the notation, then you can just read through the lessons. It's, I guess the closest analogy, what's not an analogy, it's actually the same idea, is how many of you here can read music? Yeah. So if you're very good at reading music, you read the sheet, do you hear the music? Yeah. So the same thing, when you learn a movement script and you're really fluent in movement script, you read the script, you kind of feel the movement, just like you were doing before, reading the Spanish. So this is one form, and you can see it gets quite outrageous. My wife was trained in both this kind of script, Laban script, and Benish script, and she would use this to notate Aboriginal dance because she was an anthropologist. And so she would be entrusted to watch video and then interview elders and get to what was important on that video, and that would end up on paper and down in Canberra in the Aboriginal Institute. That's a little bit of effort shape analysis. I think Laban is the only system that actually has a means of recording quality of movement. And they call that effort shape. And as I said, maybe sometime down the track we'll get to do that. Because the main advantage of learning a little bit of script is it really gets you to look very carefully what's going on. So to actually note it down, you have to go backwards. What are they doing? What are they doing? What are they doing? It makes your observation really, really keen. So Feldenkrais was partially responsible for the development of this particular movement script, which is called Eshkol-Watchman movement notation. And this particular image that you're seeing on the screen is actually the theme of about 10 different lessons, 10 different awareness through movement lessons. Feldenkrais called that particular image the primary image. Some of you might know it as the cardinal lines, but in a certain series of lessons from Alexander Yanai, this is the image that appears. You have the 5 lines, the grand articulations, the widths. This script looks a little bit different to Laban because it uses the joints as polar coordinates. So everything is thought of as moving in a cone shape, and you can see that kind of represented there. That's the staves of the script, so you enter all your little figures in each one of those little boxes, and it flows from left to right. I think Laban flows from bottom to top, left to right. So each of these scripts works in a slightly different way. And that's what it looks like on page. Quite different from Laban. And then you have good old Benish notation, which is actually written like on a musical stave. You have a stave, and you put in the various body parts on different parts of the stave. And when we put this up, a certain person popped up and started moving, who could read that script, and it was interesting watching her do that. No, we won't identify who it is unless they volunteer. No, we won't. No, don't look at anybody. So what was interesting, as soon as they started to look at the script, they started to move and do things. And that's what a script allows you to do, to read simultaneously. Yeah. No, yep.
Still use this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So while I was studying at the Victorian College of the Arts, my partner Joanne, she was doing the movement notator course, and all the dance students in the first year it was compulsory to learn this, and then it was optional to go on. So I did it for 3 years.
But do they still record productions?
No. Oh, well, Australian Ballet does. I think they have a couple of notators on their team. But generally, recording now is
video.
Recording.
Yeah.
Put it on video. Which is a shame, because then what gets missed out is the choreographer's intent, unless you have that notated off to the side somewhere. So, yeah. The Benish, not the Benish, the Eshkol Watchman, they've used that in observing animals in the wild. Well, instead of having a human figure, you have an animal anatomical figure, and then you notate that, and then you can accurately observe different behaviors. Yep.
Soren, have you got time to show us, like, say, that head and body position, what those movements would be based on that?
Yeah, sure.
Oh.
Okay, off you go. You want this? No, you don't want that, do you?
This line here, this is the head. Here. This is the compass to the knee. The line is the top of the head, shoulders, the waist, the knees, and the ankles. Oh, well, look. Yeah, because I can't point and do that. Okay, so this line here shows that the head, I'm facing this way, so that shows that the head and the torso are twisted. This sign here shows that my left foot is level, but my right foot is at the back, like that. And then this arm goes like this, which is above my head because it's a straight line, and that's side. So I'm like this, right? Then this arm comes down, so I step. This line here is going above, means that I'm going sideways because so I'm going here, and this arm comes down. Sorry, comes down. So I'm going from here, this arm comes, I go step down and goes like that. But I'm on a bent knee because this knee is bent. And this leg is behind, so I'm like this. These lines here show where it's moving from and to. I mean, these lines here. Not the dotted lines, but the solid lines. See what I'm saying? These are just marking leg positions. So that shows that this leg goes from here to here, and this leg bends.
Cool. Thank you, Philippa.
Oh yeah, the other thing is, this is a step, and this shows that they're leaving the ground. So this bit at the end, I've got my left foot behind, and you'll notice here, that these go above the line, and this means this goes.
Keep going, that's good.
It's called, those of you who've done ballet, you jump up and you change your feet. And so you go like this.
Yay. You know what was really nice? Can I say? What was really nice, as soon as this flashed up on the board, I know that. And
when I'm notating what I do in class, I write that out.
Yeah. See?
So then if there are two people doing things simultaneously, they each like a line in an orchestral score. Oh, the other thing is this matches up with the music. So that's in a 2/4. Oh no, sorry, it's 4/4 because you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. So it's mapped exactly to the rhythm of the music, and you'll see in the 4th bar you've got little and signs there, so that it shows where the accent of the movement is, and then you can there are all sorts of things, so you can actually score your whole thing like you would an orchestra.
That's great. Thank you. So when Moshe Feldenkrais was asked, do you think in terms of movement notation, his answer was no. Even though he had a very, very close working relationship with Eshkol, the lady who partially invented the Eshkol Watchman notation system. And even though he knew a little bit of it, his way of thinking was pretty much kinematics from mechanics, drawing vectors and understanding that. But when it came to a training program, he decided in his very last training program to dedicate 3 days of the training to people learning Eshkol Watchman notation, because he thought it would be a useful introduction, just like motif writing, to just be able to tune your eyes to look in for particular things. So that's what he did. So maybe somewhere down the track we'll find a person to come in and do a little bit of notation with us, just for the sake of tuning your eyes to see how a notator writes. It's very useful, and it's great to hear that you actually use it for notating classes. Yes. Becomes really tricky.
It becomes very complicated to do things on the ground.
Yeah. So when it came to the point of Joanne deciding, okay, I'm going to use notation to script Aboriginal dance, she abandoned Benish and she moved over to Laban, because it's actually a far more adaptable script. Laban, yeah. Independently, quite independently. I think Laban was the first one to kick it off, then the Benish, and then the Eshkol Watchman.
What sort of era was it?
1920s through to 1950s.
And why did they think it was necessary, like compared to previous dance, like, you know, ballet obviously been going for years, and without that, what was the thing that turned it?
Well, think about how does something that exists at one moment and disappears the next, which is movement, right? How does that pass on from person to person? Usually it passes on, I teach you, you teach the next person, you teach the next person. But you know what happens is people begin to teach their habits or their preferences. So you get a piece and it gets transformed over the years. So historians go, what was that piece all the way back there? So given that there wasn't a simple way of recording movement, there weren't cell phones that you could just go, click, okay, move. They had to invent something. So we use script to write books. We use script to write history. So why not develop a script to record movement?
So was it like the modern dance movement, or was it?
Mostly, yes.
Yeah.
But
Yep, please.
Louis the 14th.
Louis the 14th, yes.
I'll use the box system. Yeah, there was there's a very beautiful notation of Louis the 14th's court dances, and it was notated by a Jean-Louis Baptiste. And it's got all these lovely curly cue wrist movements and things like that, and they do this and all the legs, and it looks more like a Baroque script when you look at it, and it also follows the music.
Yeah.
So
there's a history to it.
But it's a way of recording it. The problem is people can't read it anymore, so it's lost.
So just like music notation, just like our alphabet, there is a way of recording movement. And once you've learned to do it, and once you stay fluent, if you remain fluent in the reading, then you pick it up and it just makes total sense to you. And there's no ambiguity because it's a script. So it's a really neat way of studying movement. Yeah. Oh, that's it. No more. As you can see, Benish has been pretty much abducted by ballet. Yeah, there we go. All right. So before we go into a lesson, any questions arising from yesterday? Any comments or something you'd like to say? Okay.
Is there any name for the folding arm series.
Is there a name?
Is there a name?
Yeah.
Is there a name for a folding arm series?
Yes, there is. The floor hug. Yeah, that's a good name. I like that. That'll do. I'll just show you straight away rather than... So the titles of the lesson, they're the titles. Integration of arms lying on stomach, integrating arms 1, integrating arms 2, crossing arms. Yeah, that's what they're labeled, right? When you look up the table of contents for the Amherst training, that's what you encounter, and nothing else. So that, guess what you have to do? You have to actually listen to them and watch them. Yeah. So, unfortunately, that is the nature of titles, but it also is the nature of how much work there still is to do. Can you imagine if there was a little abstract underneath one of those titles? Quick little abstract, and you go, oh, okay, yeah, I'll choose that movement. Well, people throughout the Feldenkrais world are starting to do that, but it's an ongoing task. So this is where your notation of things happens. Yeah. How you notate things is how you'll remember them, and then how you talk about them with your colleagues is how the lessons will get remembered and passed on. Yeah. It'd be nice if we had a little motif for each lesson, right? That'd be cool. Yeah. All right. So before you head off, these series of lessons are really a continuation of everything that you're doing, that you've been doing, with the rolling of the pelvis and the movement of the arms, everything happening in the trunk here. But now you're up at this area here in the neck and in the head. And in this area of the spine, things are really delicate. I know they support a lot of weight. They bear the 5 to 6 kilos of weight of the head, but you can see here these little red strips. This is just a small representation of the blood vessels and nerves that travel through here. So I would strongly encourage you that when you are making any backward movement of the head or any circling of the head, that you do not use momentum. Because if you use momentum, you can't stop something. You'll pass the point where it's painful. You'll go into it. Whereas if you go slowly, if you go really slowly, you can stop at any moment. And that will help you tremendously keep at ease and keep safe. Yeah.
Can I just make one quick comment, just so everyone knows, because everyone may not know, that all the lessons that are happening, as Narayan records and videos them, I'm going to be labeling them off Zoran's synopsis, which you'll get the synopsis, so it's going to match up with what's been recorded, and then Nina's going to put those on the website. So it will make much more sense than our first segment in January. So if you kind of go, what the heck was that? You can look at Zoran's synopsis and get a bit more info, and it should actually make sense this time.
Yep. I don't write an abstract. Sorry.
You got a little bit of...
No, not really. I just put the title up there. Yeah. You want a refund? So let's go on to the next lesson. Please find your space on the floor.